He's going to be singing some songs after Sergeant Benjamin Anthony shares with us. You know, we have a very common vision between Christians United for Israel and El Shaddai Ministries because we both love Israel. Does anybody love Israel here tonight? Okay, just so that you that are watching us live streaming, there's one or two of them here that do. In every row, and I'm sure you do as well. You know, last night we had a class called the Foundations class. We're trying to get people acclimatized to understanding Torah. And one of the things that's very, very clear is that how we really recognize where the covenants are with Israel, Israel's covenants. That ties us into the God of Israel. And the miracle that's happening in Israel today as a result of that faith of the Jewish people themselves. God is doing amazing things around the world, in the Middle East, and we can be sure that if we follow these individuals around, that we will be safe. You know, I think about an account that's in the Tanakh about David after he left the house of Ahimelech, and Doeg the Edomite knew that he was there and Saul was pursuing him, and because he knew that he was there, the whole house was slaughtered. And one of the priests came and found David and said, I'm going to follow you because I know I'll be in safeguard. I can tell you tonight with confidence that when we follow the God of Israel and we realize our affinity with the children of Israel, the Jewish people in the land, we will be in safeguard. The common vision that we share with Christians United for Israel is that we both love the people and the land, and hopefully we love the book as well. And so tonight, the way we're going to start this off is probably the best way that we could. I'm going to have you all stand. I'll have a word of prayer, and I'm going to ask Rafi. He's going to come and stand here in just a moment. Why don't you come up, Rafi? And he is a classically trained singer. And I can't hear out of this ear because as he was tuning up in the back, my eardrum went out. I'm just kidding. But you're in for a real joy and treat tonight to have these two gentlemen that are with us. So are we ready to go? Our gracious God and King, our Heavenly Father, you are Elohim. You are Yehovah. You are El Shaddai. It is you that we look to. It is you that you are our safeguard. You are our rear guard. You go before us, and you will protect us, Father, in the days to come. And we thank you so much, Lord, that we can know your Torah. We can follow your people. And, Father, that arm in arm together we can be one new man. So thank you for this evening tonight and these events and for blessing these people that have come. In the name of our God, who is our salvation. Remain standing for the Star-Spangled Banner and Hatikvah.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and the bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave on the land of the free and the Holod balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homiya ulfarte mizrach kadima hain letzion Sophia und Yerushalayim liyotam chofshi be'artzenu eretz Zion Yerushalayim.
Thank you. If that didn't scare the enemy, I don't know what would. Rafi, I'd like you to please be seated. I'd like you to take just a minute just to tell them what you're doing as far as the stage and so on. Actually, both him and his brother Aliyah, they live in Israel. But do you want to tell them a little bit what you're doing now as far as stage?
Yes, I can. I was classically trained in operatic music, and it's where I'm comfortable, honestly. Whereas Benjamin may be one for speaking, as you can see with my ums and ahs in between my words, I'm definitely not one for speaking, I'm more for the singing. So I now performed, I just finished a production in Jerusalem and enjoyed it very much, and I'm just planning to move on from there. So we'll see. Thank you.
Thank you. Israel is our ally. They are on the front lines in the Middle East, the only democracy really that's left in the Middle East. And so it behooves us here in the United States to support our allies that are in the Middle East. The IDF and all of the soldiers that are in the IDF, they're standing there for us. We have our own wounded warriors. We have our own soldiers, but arm in arm, there, quite frankly, is what protects this world in the spiritual sense as well. As I mentioned before, our unified vision with Christians United for Israel is to support Israel. One of the fronts that we are dealing with here on home soil are our college campuses. And we actually will be taking an offering later on in the program for Kufai on campus. And actually we'll be having some of the young adults here going to the summit this year in Washington, D.C., which is a great opportunity. I get chills every time I go to Washington, D.C., to be in our nation's capital, but to be able to actually confront and to talk to the senators and the congressmen, to be able to support Israel and to set the right pace for our country in supporting Israel. So we're glad to have with us here, of course, Randy Neal. And I'm going to have Randy come up for a minute or two before he introduces Sergeant Benjamin Anthony to talk a little bit about Christians United for Israel. So please welcome Randy Neal.
Thank you, Pastor Art. Well, I wish that Pastor Mark was here. We've become great friends, and CUFI is really grateful for the relationship that we have with El Shaddai Ministries, Pastor Art, Pastor Mark, and their leadership. I don't know how many of you know. How many of you, this is your home church? So about 3/4 of you. So that other quarter, I can tell you, I don't say this very often in churches because there's a lot of times where we're in a church because somebody just, there was an opening on the calendar and somebody unlocked the door and turned on the light for us, and that's why we were in that church. That's not why we're in this church. We're in this church because this is about as a pro-Israel a church as you are ever going to find. when you see a security guy with the Star of David rather than the Texas Star on their chest, you know you're in a pro-Israel church. So if you are looking for a church and you don't have a home church, and one of your prerequisites for a home church is that it's a pro-Israel church, you are in that church right now. So give it a 6-week test drive and see if I'm not telling you the truth. I'm glad that our Pastor David, our friend from the Seattle church is here, Pastor David and Susan, and congratulations on Sophia, your grandchild. I just had my first, my son had a child. I'm not a grandfather. You call me grandfather, I won't even look up at you. I respond to G Daddy, but I don't respond to Grandpa yet. So let's take care of some housekeeping, and then we're going to get down to business. If you have a cell phone, and it's a smart cell phone, and you subscribe to social media, like Facebook or Twitter, do not turn that cell phone off. If it's off, turn it back on, because we'd like you to go ahead and connect with your friends, tell them about what's going on. And if you want to sign the Israel Pledge via your cell phone rather than fill out a card and kill another tree, we don't want to do that. So let's do it digitally, and just simply text CUFI West to 99000. For the folks that are viewing online, again, that's CUFI West 99000. And then you'll get a confirmation message. Send us your email address, and you will join about 1 million people that have simply signed a pledge that says we believe that Israel is a sovereign nation and that she deserves to live in safety and security. And let's tack on just a little point that a lot of people misspeak. Israel does not have the right to defend her citizens. Israel has a duty to defend her citizens. It's not a right, it's a duty. So, and to underscore what Pastor Art said about why we love Israel, we love Israel because if you're a Christian, if you call yourself a Christian, you better love what God loves. And if you read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, there's a pretty good indication that God loves Israel and the Jewish people. So we're going to take care of 3 disclaimers really fast, because people get misinformation about who we are and what we do, why it is a Christian organization, wade into their hip with the Jewish leaders and the Jewish nation. Are you ecumenical? Are you interfaith? What are you checking at the door? So let's blow away some fog really fast on that. We are an evangelical Christian organization. I think it's safe to say, and Benjamin can correct me if I'm wrong, we become very good friends. He knows that I believe Jesus is the Messiah. He knows I don't make a secret about that. He knows I don't make an apology about that. But the reason that we get along so well is I don't demand that he agrees with me theologically before I'm going to stand unwaveringly with him and other Jewish leaders in the state of Israel. Second disclaimer, being pro-Israel is not synonymous with being anti-Arab. We want to see peace in the Middle East for everybody, and the Palestinian people have been hijacked by leaders that are corrupt and groups that do not have their best interests at heart. And the third disclaimer is, this is going to be a really biased presentation. And if you don't want to emerge out the other end with the notion that Israel has the right to exist, then you might want to just switch to a different website, or you might want to just reclaim your evening right now, because it's only going to get worse as the evening goes on. So we're going to be back. Pastor Art talked about our DC summit. That's where I met Sergeant Benjamin. When you belong to a pro-Israel organization that's nearly 1.5 million members strong, and you have an annual event in DC that draws thousands, there are people that fancy themselves to be articulate, gifted, speakers that will line up to, give you the opportunity to, give them a platform so that they can engage the audience. And with that said, we have our share of folks that we consider and look over. I have the spiritual gift of critical cynicism. It's extremely hard to impress me. But I found myself as the facilitator moderating a panel with which this man that you're about to meet was on. And by the time when I closed my eyes, I could have sworn I was listening to an archive clip of Abba Eban. And you can look long and far, and you're not going to find a more articulate, knowledgeable, passionate ambassador and spokesman for the nation of Israel and the Jewish people and the U.S.-Israel alliance. And so I would like you to welcome a man that's laid his life on the line for his countrymen and just for Judeo-Christian values. and who's become a fast friend of not just CUFI, but of myself as well. Give a really, really warm El Shaddai welcome to Sergeant Benjamin Anthony.
Bismillah. Thanks so much, Randy. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening to everybody here. I hope you can all hear me clearly. It's a tremendous honor and a wonderful privilege to be able to address myself to you here this evening. I'd like to begin, as ever I do, by giving my sincere thanks to God, above all else, for sparing me whilst others were not so fortunate, so that I might enjoy the privilege afforded to me here today. I thank you, Pastor, for opening your congregation to my words. One can have 1,000 things to say, but if there are no ears to listen, it's all for naught. So I thank you for that. I'd like to, of course, extend my sincere thanks to CUFI, to Christians United for Israel. I'd like to thank Mr. Randy Neal. Randy, it's a privilege to be collaborating with you once more, and you're absolutely correct. You are not merely a leader in your field, but also becoming a fast friend of mine, and I appreciate all that you do on behalf of my people. By way of a very swift reintroduction, my name's Benjamin. I am a sergeant in the Israel Defense Forces. I specialize there as a heavy machine gunner. That's what I do when I'm on uniform. Today I'm a reservist. I've personally taken part in raids, arrest patrols and ambushes in some very contested parts of the world, particularly in the city of Hebron, where I spent several months of my life as a soldier. And my duties have called upon me to take a full role in some of Israel's most recent campaigns to rid herself of the scourge of terror, particularly New Age terror tactics such as the lobbing of foreign rockets from foreign entities onto our cities and onto our civilians. And I've undertaken those duties both within and beyond the borders of Israel. And that means that if you've heard about a campaign of late or read about one in the media, it's highly likely I took part in that campaign. It's very likely that I ran up and down those hills, and you can reasonably assume that I trod in that mud. And I therefore know precisely what transpires on the front lines of Israel's battlefields because I've been there. Not as a consequence of anything that I read about in the mainstream media. And in light of many a headline that abounds about Israel, perhaps more importantly, I know what does not transpire on the front lines of our battlefields. I'm not here today speaking to you as an official nor unofficial representative of the Israeli government, defense forces, or the foreign ministry. I'm here speaking to you as one soldier of my experiences. But to begin in earnest, I would do so by drawing everybody's attention to a particular event that took place in the year 1994. I direct your attention to the year 1994 because on a winter's day in that year, there were 4 Jewish brothers, 4 siblings, in the final stages of their daily commute to the Jewish high school that they would attend. These 4 brothers traveled for 2.5 hours each way in order to arrive at their studies. But on this particular day of which I speak, events took a turn for the worse, and this day was unlike any other that had preceded it. For on this particular day, these 4 Jewish brothers, as they stepped off the train, they noted that they were being pursued by 7 men. Not by boys and not by teenagers, but by men who were flicking rocks toward them and taunting them for being Jewish. And so as they'd done on many an occasion, these 4 brothers took up a defensive formation with the eldest sibling standing tall at the front, the 2 youngest immediately behind him, and the second eldest brother bringing up the rear. And despite the quickening of their pace, they noticed that the gap between themselves and their pursuers was not widening as so they'd hoped, but in fact it was narrowing. They were being gained upon. And so they began to imagine that perhaps they would be bullied or taunted or jostled for being Jewish. But what in fact transpired was a degree of brutality too harrowing to fully narrate. For without warning, the eldest sibling was suddenly attacked. He was headbutted. He was punched unconscious, his nose broken. He was held up by one thug in order to be beaten by the other, his eyes rolling back in his skull. As this attack continued, the two youngest siblings broke ranks and they began to rap on the doors of the neighborhood, seeking help. And as quickly as those doors opened, they were closed because nobody wished to help nor to be seen to be helping. And as the eldest brother's body was finally permitted to fall to the ground, limp, and these thugs then proceeded to raise up bricks and stones and rain them down upon his head and upon his abdomen, as they stomped upon him and they kicked him, as they actually got down on their knees so that they might find a more advantageous position from where they could repeatedly raise his head to grind it time and again into the sidewalk. As this continued unabated, there was one sibling who stood by and did nothing, and that was the second eldest. And he stood by not because he was frozen by fear, but rather because he was guilty of making a gross presumption. A presumption that suggested in his own mind that these thugs would come to the understanding that enough was enough and that nothing further could be justified. But it was the instructive cry of the ringleader to his followers not to stop until that Jew was dead, that demonstrated to the second eldest sibling that if he did not act immediately to protect his brother, he was going to rapidly arrive at a point where there was nothing left to defend. Because on this particular day, this gang of brutes had left their homes with the specific intention of removing a Jew from the earth, and they articulated that. And so upon hearing that, the second eldest was finally compelled to act. He threw himself atop his brother. He was himself brutally beaten in very similar fashion. He awaited the conclusion of that attack and then stood up and looked over at his brother, who was now a bleeding and bloodied mess on the floor, purpled and bruised, and recognizable only by virtue of the clothes he wore that day. And he lifted him up in his arms, and he carried him to the school gates, and then watched as an ambulance whisked him away to the nearest hospital. My friends, the reason that I begin with that story is not to shock anybody, but to establish the candor with which I aim to proceed. Because as some of you may have discerned, you may even know, the eldest sibling that I talk about, of course, that's my dear brother Jonathan. The attack took place in Manchester, England. The two youngest siblings that I spoke about are my brothers Rafi, who you just heard singing, and Michael. And the second eldest, the one who stood by for far too long and who failed to appreciate the dangers of in time, and who was guilty of making the presumption that the opposition acted in accordance with the morals that he himself held dear, that second eldest sibling, of course, is me. I was 14 years of age at the time, but now I'm a young man. And I understand better than most the dangers of hesitation. You should know, as a consequence of that attack, Jonathan's health began to deteriorate very, very rapidly. And that deterioration culminated in him undergoing 3 liver transplants in the space of a single week. So whilst he's alive today, I unfortunately will never be able to say that he's in full health. So you see, I do understand the dangers of hesitation. I know very well what it means to grow up in Europe because I grew up there. I know precisely what it means to serve in the Israel Defense Forces because I do proudly serve there. And I know all too well what's taking place on your college campuses because I speak there. I've spoken at close to 300 such campuses to date. and I'll address myself to that in due course. But I have learned many lessons in all of the spheres in which I've spoken and lived. And paramount amongst those lessons is this, and let me be categorical. In light of the dangers that Israel faces from both within and beyond her borders, for Israel or friends of Israel to ever wait in order to defend and protect Israel is simply to await defeat. And for us to ever allow ourselves to become intimidated by the great odds that stand before us is simply to usher in a far more terrifying prospect to come to pass. And I'm concerned that will happen on our watch. And I am deeply concerned that it may be a consequence of individual and collective inactivity. As you might well imagine and understand and appreciate, following events such as those, I yearn for a place where I would be safe because I'm Jewish rather than in spite of that fact. And the only place that offers that to me today is Israel. It's not the United States of America, as glorious as the Jewish existence is here, and we're grateful for that. It's not Europe. The domino of European Jewry, in my opinion, fell some time ago. I doubt it will ever be propped upright again. It certainly is not England. It's Israel, and it's Israel alone. And my story, as I tell it to you, my friends, is not a story from mid-20th century Europe. It's happening today. It will happen tomorrow, and it happens to be the story of thousands of Jewish people who ready themselves to leave that continent en masse because of the borrowed time upon which they perceive themselves to be living. There in Israel, we are totally, totally free. And that freedom doesn't come without a cost. And it certainly doesn't come without a sacrifice. And as just one citizen soldier, I know all too well the realities of such costs and such sacrifices. Shortly after my arrival in Israel, I had the great privilege of being drafted into service in the Israel Defense Forces. I recall the first war in which I took part, the Second Lebanon War, a difficult war indeed. You know, in 2006, the year in which that war took place, as Hezbollah, without mercy, rocketed the residents of northern Israel into the towns of Haifa, Tiberias, Kiryat Shmona, some of those towns you'll be familiar with. Or more recently, in 2008, 2009, as Hamas pummeled the residents of southern Israel, placing close to 1 million of Israel's citizens firmly in the shadow of terror, amongst them anywhere between 60 to 90,000 Arabs who dwell peacefully within our borders there. As those two sequences have occurred, I'm sure and I hope that it made for a troubling headline for you people here. Because it means that you care. And it means that you're invested. And it means that you're granting your time to a dynamic that warrants your attention. But what the world must urgently understand and recognize is that for the men alongside whom I serve, the towns that I just spoke about are not headlines, they are their homes. They are homes just like yours, just like mine, and just like those of the students who line up on your college campuses to indict the soldiers of Israel. For the soldiers of Israel, rockets were not merely falling on Haifa, an abstract town in the north, or Tiberias, but they were falling on Haifa and Tiberias, which happened to be the towns in which they grew up. They were falling on Kiryat Shmona, which happens to be the town in which they went to school. And for at least 12 long years, these rockets have been falling on the southern town of Sderot, which happens to be the town in which their mothers sleep and where their brothers and sisters play. The towns which for far too long have been under fire and which we alone must defend, because if we do not do so, nobody else will. And dare I say it, world opinion can wait a moment because our homes are on fire. My friends, since my demobilization from full-time service, I have had, as I mentioned, the humbling privilege of speaking at some 300 or close to 300 college campuses in Canada, in the United States, in South Africa, in the United Kingdom, and soon enough in Israel as well. In November of last year, I found myself in the very midst of a campus tour orchestrated and brought about by none other than Christians United for Israel on campus, CUFI on campus. In November of last year, due to the unit to which I'm assigned, as I witnessed the intensification of rockets being fired once more from Gaza onto our people in Israel, I was mindful of the fact that I would likely be called to report to the line. On one particular evening, I found myself going to bed in Fargo, North Dakota. Hands up if you've been to Fargo, North Dakota. As I lay my head to rest, I was unsurprised to receive a text message sent to my cellular phone by my commanding officer. And it read quite simply and succinctly, "Benjamin, our unit's been put on high alert, await further orders." I retired for the evening because that's the life of a soldier in the Israel Defense Forces. Being called is part of our lives and part of our existence. I then boarded a flight thereafter and I touched down in LaGuardia Airport in New York. Switched on my cellular phone. And there came the follow-up message which read once again, "Benjamin, we've been activated, report to the line." I purchased an airline ticket and I arrived at the base. And 135 out of the 135 soldiers called into the reserves reported to do the very same, as did I. I think that as friends of Israel, as we witness the intensification of rocket fire once more from Gaza, we perhaps tend to fall prey to the mindset that this is well-trodden ground, that we've seen all of this before, that the cycle of violence merely makes yet one further revolution, that there's nothing new here. But you should be very, very wary of falling into such a mindset. I believe it is to Mark Twain that the phrase is attributed that history does not repeat itself. At best, it rhymes. In other words, whilst there are certain lessons to be drawn from history, there are also distinctions to be made in the present. And I'd like to bring to your attention two such distinctions very swiftly. The first distinction I would like to make is that in 2008-2009, during Operation Cast Lead, Israel's last defensive operation inside Gaza, prior to Operation Pillar of Defense, the number of Israel's citizens being bombarded by rockets from Gaza rested at the figure of 1 million. It's an alarming figure indeed. Today, though, that is no longer the case. Today, the number of Israel's citizens proven to be living well within range of rockets emanating from Gaza rests at 3.5 million. That is half the population of the Jewish state. So the odds against us have not decreased, rather they've increased. But the second distinction I wish to draw to your attention is altogether more personal. The second distinction I wish to draw to your attention today is that as I arrived on the base, coming towards me from the distance and drawing ever closer, I was struck by the fact that the image moving toward me was none other than my younger brother Raphael, who, having served in the Israel Defense Forces, had been drafted into his reserve unit to face down precisely the same threats with all of the accompanying dangers, and I'll speak to you about those dangers. And though he's no longer a child, he will forever be my baby brother. And I suddenly found myself burdened with a dilemma I'd never anticipated. Do I transfer Raphael to serve by my side so that I might watch over him? Or do I leave him where he's assigned? If I were to transfer him and harm were to befall him there, that would surely be my fault because I'd manipulated events. But by equal measure, were I to leave him and harm were to befall him where he was initially assigned, that would be my fault as well, for I'd not brought him to my side. And I did not have the natural recourse that one would have of telephoning my father and seeking his counsel, for who amongst us would wish to burden their father with such a dilemma? But the reality of the matter is that contrary to the age-old adage, I am my brother's keeper, and he is my keeper. And what we friends of Israel must realize urgently and understand is that when it comes to the future of the Jewish state, we are all the keeper of one another, and we must stand fast together forever as is required. I know very well the realities of war. Nobody in this room needs school me as to that truth. I recall the first time I became acquainted with the horror of war. It was as we crossed the border into a foreign land to repel rockets launched against my people, and marching towards the village we had been assigned to capturing, I was struck by the image of the tanks of Israel, there in a battlefield. The very same tanks, incidentally, that I was certain would have won us that war with ease as they roared past me on their maneuvers. But there in a combat zone after the battle, I saw those tanks burned out and destroyed. They were overturned and they were useless and they were twisted by the side of the dirt tracks that soldiers follow. Let nobody ever tell you that we fight against a people using nothing more than slingshots and pebbles against us. Those tanks are testament to the falsehood of such an assertion. They are capable and they're not to be underestimated. And then drawing again closer to those tanks, I saw the sight of the soldiers who had manned those tanks. And there in the darkness I noticed that these were soldiers without their arms and without their legs. And soldiers, of course, who'd been blindfolded because they'd been blinded by shrapnel flying through the air. And then I drew ever closer and noticed that the bearers of these soldiers were injured but able soldiers of Israel, bleeding but willing soldiers of Israel. I know that as I continued on that march, I was struck, and I will never forget the sight of the dead Israeli soldiers lined up there by the side of that road. The image of the dead is ingrained deeply within my psyche because you only have the opportunity to see such sights in flashes of blue and grey whenever there's a nearby detonation, because we operate at night. And it's wrong and it's criminal and it's perverse that these soldiers are portrayed on many a university campus here in the United States as being everything that they're not as boys but as barbarians, not as defenders but as invaders, and not as these frightened sons forced to protect their homes, but rather as these bloodthirsty killers. And when you march through and past sites such as those, you pause to ask yourself, who were these soldiers? Well, the truth is they were would-be students. Recent high school graduates with precisely the same ambitions that students here in America carry. But unlike here in America, our soldiers, those dead soldiers, will never have the chance to learn. They were would-be husbands, of course, who dreamt of establishing a home and a family after the combat. But they will never meet their brides. And they are sons who will never again be seen by their parents. They are parents just like mine, and parents just like you and yours, in whose defense they have been forced to lay down their lives. Does anybody really believe that this is a lifestyle that we elect? That we wouldn't take peace in a heartbeat if only it were within our grasp? And yet, if my memories of war disturb my days, and they certainly do, sometimes at the beginning of the day and sometimes at the close of the day, but there's never a day that passes by without such recollection. If my memories of war disturb my days, what is going on your university campuses causes far greater disruption to my nights. You see, I have spoken at that many campuses, and I can bear personal witness to the fact that on most university campuses, no effort is spared when it comes to defaming the state of Israel. Students, anti-Israel students on campus, are not working to delegitimize the state of Israel, as is so often erroneously suggested. They are working to destroy it. And they're working to destroy it by way of the media, the marketplace, and particularly in your hallways of academia. And I'm urging you to take note of that threat, because it is not a threat from mid-20th century Europe. It's happening today, it will happen tomorrow, and I assure you it is happening on a campus very close to you indeed. You see, from Harvard to Yale to Berkeley to Dartmouth to UCLA and beyond, I'm aware of the fact that when I address myself to students today, in 15 to 20 years from now, they will be policymakers. And you know it, and I know it. I'm aware of the fact that a student today will ascend to positions of great power. And I recognize the reality that those enrolled in an Ivy League school, for example, will cast tremendous influence. And they are being educated in an environment oftentimes that is hostile towards Israel, even hostile towards the Jews. And a student, a pro-Israel student, is no less embattled, as I said, on a college campus in America than a soldier of Israel is on the front lines of a combat zone. Here are some of the allegations that abound and repeat themselves. As I stand in the auditoria, that Israel's an apartheid state, that we were disproportionate during our actions inside Gaza, that the soldiers of Israel are to the Palestinians what the Nazis of Europe were to the Jews. I'm regularly and often accused of raping Palestinian women on checkpoints simply because I serve on those checkpoints. And when I bat away that claim because of its falsehood, audience members turn around and they say, you see, he's so very racist, he will not even rape a Palestinian. And the mud is sticking because people require absolutely no evidence whatsoever to indict a soldier of Israel. Why is this so very urgent? Why must we take note of this threat on campus? Well, I could surely bombard you with facts and figures and graphs and charts and statistics, but I'd much rather bring you to the understanding by way of speaking to you of my experience. And my experience tells me this. I have, as has every soldier, I've clutched many, many rifles in my palms during the course of my service. The rifle that I carried during basic training is not the same rifle as I carried when I became operational. And the rifle that I carried as a conscript is not the same rifle as I carry as a reservist. The rifle I carry within our borders is not always the same as the rifle I carry beyond our borders. They're all held in their own way, they're all greased in their own way, and if needs be, they're all fired in their own way. But in all of the rifles that I have held, there is one common denominator that unifies them all. It's a very succinct phrase. It's engraved into the steel above the chamber into which we insert the magazine of bullets. Do you know what it says? It says, property of the United States government. And every single tent in which I've ever slept says, property of the United States government. And every night scope through which I've looked to carry out my duties says, property of the United States government. It does not say manufactured in the United States. And it does not say imported from the United States. It says property of the United States. And what you must discern from that is that the means and the methods and the tools that the Jewish state has of defending itself, many of those means, methods, and tools are on loan. And loans can be recalled, make no mistake about it, or discontinued. One of the primary reasons that we're able to defend ourselves are the great alliances that we've forged with this great country, but that is changing, and it's changing on your university campuses. And who will push back if not you? Who will repel this threat if not you? I wish I could stand here and tell you that nobody will, but I'm afraid that's not the case. Here's an interesting fact for you. Across a 4-year period for time release, the Saudi Arabian kingdom made a donation of $20 million to the Palestinian Authority. $20 million to be released across a period of 4 years. By contrast, that same kingdom made a one-off donation of $20 million to Harvard, $20 million to Georgetown University. You can go and look it up. And in the case of Georgetown University, it came with the stipulation of establishing an Islamic Studies Center in the School of Foreign Services. Now, that's not a coincidence. That's a sound strategy. You put $20 million into Georgetown, where future legislators yearn to study because of its proximity to the circles of power in D.C., and $20 million into arguably the most prestigious university in the Western world, Harvard. There are many organizations that have taken up this fight on campus. But there is no organization that has done so with the courage, with the certainty, with the clarity, and with the moral guidance that I have witnessed, shown, demonstrated, and acted upon by the students of Kufi on campus. Christians united for Israel on campus. That's our reality over there. These are the two battles in which I find myself embroiled. But with all of the challenges that we face, I'm struck time and again by the number of students and friends of Israel who turn to me and they say, "Benjamin, is it all worth it? What is it that you're fighting for?" Well, I'd like to answer that question directly for you here this evening. And I bring you my answer in my name, not in the name of anybody else. For there are great friends of Israel, people whose friendship I don't doubt or question for a moment, who say that we must forever have the state of Israel and fight for the state of Israel and redouble our efforts on behalf of the state of Israel because she's the only functioning democracy in the Middle East. You'll have heard that narrative. And I'm very, very proud of that fact. But there may be 5 new democracies that spring up in that region tomorrow. And then where would that narrative be? You should know that my great-grandparents did not yearn towards Israel because she was likely to be a democracy. In actual fact, they yearned towards Israel even when, mistakenly, she was deemed and judged most likely to be socialist. That's why Joseph Stalin cast his vote in favor of establishing the state of Israel, ironically one of our founding fathers. But my Jewish great-grandparents still yearned towards that land, did they not? Others yet believe we must forever have the state of Israel because she's on the forefront of technological advent and innovation. They seem to suggest that Motorola has a strong presence in Israel, and therefore we must forever have the state of Israel. But if down goes Israel, your cell phones will continue to ring. You know it, and I know it. And my great-grandparents did not yearn towards Israel when she was on the forefront of technological advent and innovation. They didn't. They actually were yearning towards Israel when she was merely a series of swamps and of deserts riddled with malaria and disease. But still they yearned towards that land, did they not? And there are others yet, including in the highest echelons of government, who believe that we must forever have the state of Israel because of the horrors of the Holocaust. But that's factually and historically incorrect. And I assure you that my great-grandparents yearned towards Israel long before we ever knew the names of Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen and Treblinka and Sobibor or Adolf Hitler or any train tracks that led to the demise of my people. None of those are the reasons that I believe we must forever have the state of Israel, we must forever fight for the state of Israel, and dare I say it, we must be prepared to give all in the defense of the state of Israel, because though people do not speak in these terms, I must. There are some things in this world worth dying for. There just are. And typically they are the very same things we deem worthy of being lived for. And Israel the country and Israel the people are two such things in my book, though I hope to live long, of course, on behalf of Israel. But what is it that I fight for? I fight for one thing and one thing only. I fight because I have the knowledge and the understanding that that tiny strip of land, Israel, as is evinced in every single prayer book, on every single bookshelf, in every single synagogue, of every single denomination, in every single city, town, country, continent where there is a synagogue, in whichever language our prayers are translated into, whether people have the good sense to hold the book upside down, back to front, or the right way round, Israel, that country, happens to be the homeland of the Jewish people. And that's it, and that's all. It is from Israel that my people stems, and it is about Israel that my people's collective future is inextricably tied. And I happen to believe that if Israel, the country, does well, you will do well. That's my belief. A very brief analysis of the name in Hebrew bears some mentioning. It's comprised of two words in Hebrew, Yashar Kel, directly to God. It's not a coincidence. My people believe that somewhere in the annals of our history that was sworn unto our forefathers by God. And the great tragedy of this generation is that we cast that aside. But even our most secular leaders, people such as Theodor Herzl and David Ben-Gurion, they understood that. And that's why we went there and we did not go to Uganda. It's the home of the Jewish people. And it needs to be protected. And it needs to be guarded. And it needs to be watched over. Proudly, zealously, and unabashedly, never militantly, but forever with pride. And so I say this to you here. When you consider the opposition that a pro-Israel student on campus is facing, how can you not, friends of Israel, place your hands into the smalls of their backs and move them forward? How can you not move them on to a courageous stand? How can you not enable them to be our ambassadors in the circles that matter the most? How can you not help them to help you? And I'll extend another challenge to you. Every year, there is a conference in Washington, D.C. It attracts thousands of people. I've had the privilege of speaking at that conference, though I do not work for this organization, the Christians United for Israel Annual Summit in Washington, D.C. I mentioned they bring thousands year upon year. This year I'm challenging you. Breach the capacity of that convention center. With what you have, how can you not go? How can you stand here and not go? It's a modern day miracle. Avail yourselves of it. Enjoy it. Take part in it. Most of you will never serve, and that's fine. So you'll never have to ask if you're willing to die for Israel. But equally, never should you have to ask if you're willing to live for Israel. I'm asking you to live for Israel, and I'm asking you to give for Israel, and I'm asking you to do so with the good courage that you have shown thus far. And to sustain you in that challenge, recall one prayer. I believe you'll be familiar with this prayer. Hashem oz le'amo yiten, Hashem yavarech et amo b'shalom. God will give his people strength. God will bless his people with peace. The construction of that prayer bears some analysis. First comes strength. Peace may yet follow. You are part of that strength. I thank God for you. I thank God for the states of Israel, and I pray as ever I do for Shalom al Yisrael, for peace over Israel. Thank you very, very much for listening to me.
In the 1930s, through propaganda and education against the Jews, the demonization of the Jews, slowly it infiltrated both the political system but also the educational system. And the result of it, we know, was the Holocaust. And the fear is that today we might have a repeat of it.
There's a lot of anti-Israel sentiment at the university. A lot of the students, they'll spread lies about Israel.
They demonize Israeli Jews. They delegitimize the state of Israel.
How many women have you raped? How many children have you raped? You are a child molester.
There's been a concerted effort on the part of the fundamental Islam to infiltrate the American college system.
The people that were bringing some of the anti-Israel material to campus were actually faculty members.
We had several different pro-Israel speakers come, and we had professors go there screaming, "Death to Israel, kill the Jews."
I even had a professor showing a video that was talking about how anyone who supports Israel is anti-American.
And there's a double standard there. In the classroom, the students that are pro-Israel are often shouted down or ridiculed.
They will intimidate you, they will threaten you.
We will fight you until we are either martyred or until we are victorious.
They're trying to convert the American college system into haters of Israel and the haters of the Jewish people.
One thing that really stood out to me was Christians United for Israel's seal. For Zion's sake, I will not be silent.
I just fell in love with Kufi. I had this passion for Israel within me, but I had no way of really expressing it.
Kufi on campus has completely changed my ability to advocate on behalf of Israel and on behalf of the Jewish people.
Kufi gave me an opportunity to really start educating myself on a fight that's going on right now, and I believe one that's only going to get harder.
It is essential that we equip young Christian leaders with the knowledge and ability to speak up and to stand up for the truth, presenting a compelling case for the American and Christian support for the Jewish state.
Kufi has been such a blessing in every other aspect of my life. I really felt like God kept bringing it into my life and laying it on my heart. I'm a college student. I can't give all of my resources, but I can give my voice, I can give my hands, and I can give my feet to do the will and the purpose that I'm called to do.
What's really cool is you're able to take your faith and your theology and convert it into action. God has given us a voice to speak up for Israel and the Jewish people.
The truth must be said. And what Kufi is doing exactly that. They're telling the truth.
And when you mix passion and truth, you can't lose.
At our events, we were able to articulate to the community members what was going on and why it was so important that they speak up.
It was amazing to see some of the students' response, how interested they were.
I applied for the summer summit, and that really kind of rocked my world.
That DC Kufi summit, I believe, changed my life.
I would say, bar none statistically, the amount of individuals that come to Kufi Summit and go back and do activism on their campus outweighs any other organization.
The conversation about Israel on America's college campuses must be changed right now. Please join us in this critical effort today. We cannot afford to lose this fight. Show your support for CUFI on campus today.
Bring this up for me. Thank you, Sergeant Benjamin Anthony. We appreciate that. Let's show our appreciation again. 2 months ago, Pastor Mark and his wife Vicki and my wife and Bill and Rocio Voice were in San Antonio at the Leadership Summit for Christians United for Israel. And there were 3 young people, 2 college students on one campus was Berkeley. I forget the other campuses, and the other one was working in ministry. And I'll tell you right now, I was greatly encouraged. Many of you here that are sitting in your seats, you know you came from the hippie generation. You know what we were like. But we still had to have strong hearts because many of us went through civil rights. We went through Vietnam. And as Vietnam vets that are sitting in here today, you know what you went through. But to see those college students that were at that summit, I was greatly encouraged. But I'll tell you, I'm even more greatly encouraged because of the young adults we have in this congregation, and even some of you that are from other congregations that I know that are here that were there at the CUFI Summit last year. My wife and I and our children, we lived in Boston for a number of years, and I used to travel the route along Route 2 between Concord and Lexington rather often. And if any of you have been there in Concord, which is where Ralph Waldo Emerson's house was, just down the road from there is the Old North Bridge, where the shot was heard that rang around the world, that was heard around the world, that started the Revolutionary War. Just 2 weeks ago, this Monday evening, I believe, at the Boston Marathon, and many people in the U.S. really didn't realize it because we've been in Boston, so we know what happened on that day, was also known as Patriots' Day. That was the day that the shot was fired that was heard around the world. I stood many times at the Old North Bridge and walked across it with an ethereal feeling that our liberty began there. That the British stood on one side, and no offense to our British friend right here, our British friends, but the bullets ripped through the coats of both individuals. There were no bulletproof vests. And the blood poured from Lexington to Concord. And we're sitting here because of that. Okay? So our young people today are fighting a different front. The Old North Bridge is on every campus. And it's not machine guns and bullets. It's words, it's flags, it's banners, it's hatred. Pastor Mark and myself and Bill Voice, just 2 weeks ago, we were on a campus here very locally, just within less than a half a mile from here, and I'll tell you I was greatly encouraged as well. Why? Because of the synergy of those young people. They want to learn, they want to know. It's just what will they absorb? That is the question. But there is a synergy, and our young people have that same synergy here. You know, we can come to Shabbat every week. We can come to Monday night Bible study, and we love to have our ears tickled by the word, don't we? And we're blessed to hear it. But as he said, many of us here, we've already served or will never serve. Some of our young people may never, but they will be on the front lines. And if their education doesn't change relative to the education status on these campuses and the stand that they might take by having a chapter of Christians United for Israel, we're behind those lines. So we're next. The media is the tool of the enemy today. And so, as I say that I'm greatly encouraged, is because in our agreement with Christians United for Israel, our united vision to support Israel, we support our allies on the front line by supporting our college students. And this July, I know we will all be present at that. Some of you here will as well. And I know, how many of you have been to Israel here? Just so that Sergeant Benjamin Anthony can see how many have been to Israel here. Are you blessed going to Israel? You know, and I'm going to tell you something right now, and I know many of you got your piggy banks and you're putting your pennies in there to save for Pastor Mark's trip next year or possibly this fall. But I'm going to tell you, you need to save some pennies to go to Washington, D.C. Because I'll be honest with you, I've been to Israel now, and we love Israel. Our capital is about 3,000 miles from here, right close to the state of Virginia. That's where our leaders are. And I think we've got it pretty well down now, and you can ask Randy Neal that if he wants to say any more. We do a pretty good job of confronting these politicians. And I'll tell you this as well, that the governor of this state changed his vote relative to Israel and being against Iran when we walked into his office and checked his voting record, and he hadn't voted. And I got an email next week, and he thanked us because we're in there, and he changed his vote. So don't tell me you can't do anything in Washington. The young men and the boys that went to war in the Revolutionary War, maybe they went as boys, but they came back men. And we hope that when our young adults go to college, or even when they go into the workforce, that they are men and women with the heart of God and the heart of Torah and a heart for Israel. But they can't do that if they're not amongst a unified group that helps them to see where the battlefront really is. And that's why we support Christians United for Israel and CUFI on campus. And so in just a minute, I'm going to have Rafi come up again, and he's going to sing 2 songs for us. And we were going to take an offering for CUFI on campus, which we strongly believe here. We want to send more students, and I know this as well, and maybe you folks don't realize it, that our young adults that have been in the last couple of years including my daughter, when they come back, they're much stronger individuals. They stand more on Torah, and their belief in the strength for Israel is stronger because they see people their age, hey, they're believing just like I am. They understand now the threat. This is their world now, okay? This is their world now. We want to stand behind them and support them, don't we? It's easy to go home and watch Revolution. It's easy to go to the movies, but this is real life, folks. And if your heart wasn't moved tonight by what you heard, because I'll tell you what, mine was, I keep telling my wife, I wish I was 18 again, but that's not going to happen. And so I'd like to bring Rafi up right now. And I'd like the ushers to come forward because if your heart wasn't throbbing to another beat when he sang the 2 anthems, I don't know what will. So, are you ready? Do we have the music? Thank you.
God gave this land to me, this brave and ancient land to me. And when the morning sun reveals the hills and plains, then I see a land where children can run free. Just let my hand and walk this land with me, and walk this lovely land with me. just a man when you are by my side. With the help of God, I know I can be strong. With the help of God, I know I can be strong and to make this land our own. If I must fight, I'll fight to make this land our home until
Thank you.
Avir harim salul kayain vereach oranim nisam baruach rabayim im kol של נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שגירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שגירייך חזרנו אל בורות המים, לשוק ולכיכר. שופר גורר את הר הבית בעיר העתיקה. ובמרום שבסלע מהלילות זורחות, נשוב מרדנו אל ים המלח בדרך יריחו. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, to say that was amazing, Raphael, would be the understatement of the century. God loves you, and I have an excellent plan for your life. So this is not the last CUFI event you're going to be singing at. You can put that in ink, I assure you. So. I want to just simply underscore, and you know, I don't want to, for those that are watching this online at this website, I know this website gets, I don't know if Sergeant Benjamin knows this, but I know this website on which you're viewing gets literally hundreds of thousands of hits every month. And so I know that there's a lot of folks out there that, you know, or may not get this next joke. It might be listening to somebody else's home movies, but when you did the national anthem, I don't think a better rendition was ever done in a ballpark before a game was ever played. And I was thinking to myself, I'm from Sacramento, California, and I don't want to hear you sing for the Seattle Kings ever, okay? So, because they're not going anywhere. So let's get back to business, okay? We almost lost the reverence of the evening there for a moment. So just to elaborate, again, a lot of folks, we stress the importance of going to DC, and we stress the importance of bringing our campus age, you know, young leaders to DC. But one thing that we didn't articulate to you is that we're trying to make it as easy as possible for those young men and women to go and have a life-changing experience in Washington, DC. Just like Pastor Art's daughter had, and like literally by now thousands that have gone before her. About 500 college students from across this country have scholarships waiting, either awarded to them or are waiting to be awarded to them. And we want the state of Washington, or whatever state that you're watching this from, we want those young delegates to be represented. And we will sponsor them. All you need to do is have somebody, have a pastor, have a trusted leader nominate them at cufi.org. And they have to write an essay. We have to vet them and make sure that they can connect the dots to the Jewish roots of their Christian faith. And they will go to Washington, D.C., and they'll get a critical thinking filter installed. They will come back a ninja ambassador advocate for the state of Israel. And God help anyone that wants to do an anti-Israel movement on their campus. A lot of people are wringing their hands. We can rest assured, former President Carter and the New York Times would persuade us that the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood are really a peace-loving, democratic, secular organization. But truth would have it is that Hamas is, by definition, the Palestinian strain of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. And if you want to know what they're capable of, take a look at what Hamas does. In 1964, the Muslim Brotherhood came to the United States, and they founded the Muslim Student Association to provide a place for students studying abroad to be able to fellowship with other students, have a place to pray, have a place to bring non-Muslim students to come and learn about Middle Eastern culture, break down the walls of misunderstanding, break down those barriers, build a bridge of mutual trust and understanding, and by the end of the evening, speak about the evil Zionist regime. Today, 39 years later, they've got about 150 chapters on campuses across this country, representation on hundreds more. 5 years ago, we founded CUFI on campus, not to mute any critics, not to shut down any chapters, not to even criticize groups like that. Simply to level the playing field so that on our college campuses, Israel is fairly and accurately portrayed. Five years later, we have 125 chapters up and running, and hundreds are represented by students on them. And I'm not talking about do-nothing people whose name is on a piece of paper. I'm talking about top-drawer young leaders, responsible, mature, capable beyond their years. When we first started, we hoped and wondered if our students would go on to become interns. This week, I got a request from an intern in D.C. wanting to start a chapter. One of our alumni, I just saw him last night, one of our alumni from Arizona, he's now the Director of Academic Affairs for the Israeli Consulate General. That is the caliber of individuals that we're talking about. Don't let yourself fall asleep when you lay your head on your pillow tonight without racking your brain to think of that young leader. They may be in the youth group at your church. They may be a neighbor's child. They may be a niece or a nephew of your own family. They are responsible and mature beyond their youth. Nominate them. We'll take it from there. Go to CUFI.org. Nominate them, and we will we'll do everything that we can to bring them to DC so that when we're done, when these gray-haired sages that served once or never will served, when we do what we can to live for Israel, and our days are numbered and our stamina is waning, we will know, and one thing that we can rest assured on is that we have effectively passed that baton to the Joshua generation. Because if we don't do that, then all of this is shadowboxing. We need to pass the baton. Right now, you take a poll across America, 62 to 70% of Americans want to see a strong U.S.-Israel relation. You take that same poll on a college campus, it drops to 32%. Those are the people that are going to be running for Congress and senators in just a decade or two. And we need to change the trend right now. Join us in D.C. Take your vacation days, take your vacation dollars, and make a vacation with a purpose. We're going to send a message to our elected officials that it's not just their Jewish constituents that care about strong U.S.-Israel relations. Amen? All right. Thank you, Pastor Art. There's a real short clip, and then I'm going to pass it back to Pastor Art.
The Bible says, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love thee. This summer, you will have the opportunity to show that support and let your voice be heard. Join us July the 22nd through the 24th in our nation's capital at the Christians United for Israel Washington Summit. We have no doubt that CUFI was created for such a time as this. If you support Israel, you need to be there and take a stand for the peace of Jerusalem.
I hope that many of you here tonight prayerfully reconsider and think about going to Washington, D.C. with us this year. As again, I said, Pastor Mark and myself will be there, as well as Bill Voice. And also for you young adults who feel that God's calling you in your heart to be a part of this, you make sure you come up here afterwards so we can talk about this, because we're very excited about this. And so I want to thank all of you that have come tonight to be a part of this, and those of you watching us live streaming. I hope your lives have been affected as much as many of the people that are here tonight, and that this Pulse Beat goes out around the world. And I'd like some of you, and I know that some of you have joined us from around the world in D.C. last year, and we'd like to see some of you who watch us live streaming around the world to join us in Washington, D.C., especially around the country. Thank you, Sergeant Benjamin Anthony, for your commitment. Our heart's with you. And with you, Raphael, we appreciate both of you being here. And of course, Randy Neal, you're always welcome here. And thank all of you again. And I want to close with a word of prayer. So why don't we all stand? Avinu Malkeinu, our God, our King, the Creator and King of the universe, who sanctified us by His commandments. You are our strength. You are our song. You are our tower that we run toward. We look for you at all times. Bless these people here tonight who have given of their abundance, Father, to share part of what they have to be able to help these young people so that we might be able to change people, these campuses, one student at a time, that we might change the destiny of a nation and support that which holds up the Middle East, for the destiny of all peoples lies in the commitment to Israel and to our Mashiach, whom we look for. In the name of our God, who is our salvation, Yeshua. Amen, amen. Good night. Thank you for coming. And Sergeant Anthony, you'll be up here if people want to meet you or chat with you? Okay.
Sing joyfully, He will save us. Rejoice, rejoice, daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, Israel. Rejoice with all your heart, O Jerusalem. Roni, 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 Vasion, Hallelujah, Israel. Yivotzi, V'chomer, V'Yerushalayim. Roni, Roni, Vasion, Hallelujah, Israel. Yivotzi, V'chomer, V'Yerushalayim. V'Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim,